Blood soaked through Marcus Johnson's shirt as he knelt in the Serengeti dust, his hands trembling above the wounded lioness's swollen belly. The approaching engine sounds made his head snap up, eyes widening in recognition. It wasn't just poachers coming, it was Reynolds' men with their distinctive red bandanas and military-grade weapons. Eleanor grabbed his shoulder, her weathered fingers digging into his flesh. "Marcus, we need to leave now," she hissed, the research equipment clattering as she hastily packed. Even Catherine, who'd documented 100 wildlife crises, backed away, her camera forgotten at her side. The lioness, Savannah, locked eyes with Marcus, her amber gaze reflecting pain that transcended species. Just yesterday, he'd told Eleanor that animals couldn't communicate with humans. Now, he understood how wrong he'd been. "Get the tranquilizer," Marcus commanded, even as his mind screamed to flee. "We're staying." Could he save this magnificent creature and her unborn cubs? Or would his mother's fate repeat itself in the merciless African sun? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Serengeti stretched endlessly under the merciless African sun, its golden grasslands parched by the worst drought in 50 years. What was once a thriving ecosystem now resembled a wasteland, with dried riverbeds snaking through the landscape like ancient scars. Lion populations had plummeted by 90% in just a decade, victims of poaching, habitat loss, and the unforgiving climate. Dr. Marcus Johnson had spent the last 15 years trying to reverse this tide. At 38, his once youthful face now bore the weathered look of someone who'd spent too many nights under the stars and too many days fighting losing battles. His dark hair was peppered with premature gray, and the lines around his eyes deepened whenever he smiled, which wasn't often these days. "You're chasing ghosts again," Dr. Eleanor Blackwell remarked, lowering her binoculars as their jeep bounced over the uneven terrain. At 78, Eleanor was a legend in wildlife biology circles, the first woman to conduct extensive research on African lions in the 1970s. Her white hair was always pulled back in a tight bun, and despite the heat, she wore her signature khaki vest with too many pockets. Savannah's pride was last spotted 20 miles north. "William radioed in tracks near the eastern ridge," Marcus replied, not taking his eyes off the horizon. "Fresh ones," Eleanor snorted. "William Thompson sees what he wants to see. That man's been guiding safaris so long he started believing his own tall tales." Marcus couldn't help but smile. William had been their guide for 5 years now, a former poacher who'd had a change of heart after nearly being killed by the very animals he hunted. His knowledge of the Serengeti was unmatched, as was his ability to track almost any creature across impossible distances. "Dr. Johnson, you might want to see this," called Catherine Miller from the back seat, her American accent still jarring after 3 months in camp. The philanthropist had arrived with her film crew and checkbook, promising to fund their research for 5 years, a lifeline when their government grants were drying up faster than the watering holes. At 42, she carried herself with the confidence of old money, though Marcus had caught glimpses of something else behind her designer sunglasses, something that suggested her interest wasn't purely academic. Marcus stopped the jeep and took the high-powered lens Catherine offered. In the distance, nearly invisible against the tawny grass, lay Savannah, the last breeding lioness with the rare golden mane gene. Her swollen belly confirmed what they had hoped. She was pregnant, likely in her final weeks. "She's alone," Marcus observed, concern edging his voice. "Simba hasn't been seen since the attack at Herdsman's Rock," Eleanor said quietly, using the name they'd given to Savannah's mate. "Victor Reynolds and his hunting party were in that exact area 3 weeks ago." The name hung in the air like a curse. Victor Reynolds, trophy hunter, political power broker, and the man responsible for more lion deaths than anyone could count. Despite international outrage, His connections kept him supplied with permits and protection. We need to monitor her closely, Marcus decided, starting the engine again. If those cubs don't survive, we lose the entire genetic line. What he didn't say, what everyone in the Jeep already knew, was that without new cubs, the Serengeti's lion population might never recover. And something told Marcus that Savannah somehow understood this too, carrying the future of her species inside her as she walked alone through an increasingly hostile world. The expedition to track Savannah began at dawn. Marcus drove while Eleanor checked their medical supplies, tranquilizers, antibiotics, and the portable ultrasound they'd acquired through Catherine's foundation. William Thompson rode ahead on his motorcycle, periodically circling back to report. "She's moving toward the eastern acacia grove," William announced during one such return, his leathery face glistening with sweat. At 55, the former poacher moved with the agility of a man half his age, his tall frame lean and weathered from decades under the African sun. "Following the old migration route, though there ain't been wildebeest there for 3 seasons now." "Instinct," Eleanor murmured, making notes in her worn field journal. "She's seeking the birthing grounds her ancestors used. Lions have generational memory." Catherine adjusted her camera, capturing the conversation. Her documentary was supposed to highlight conservation efforts, but Marcus had noticed her particular interest in the human stories behind the science. "You think she's close?" Catherine asked, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her face. "Very," William confirmed. "Saw fresh tracks and scat. She's moving slower now, probably feeling her time coming." They followed William's directions, taking the Jeep as far as they could before continuing on foot. The heat intensified as the sun climbed higher, and Marcus felt sweat trickling down his back. Eleanor matched his pace despite her age, though he noticed her breathing had become more labored in recent months. "You should have stayed at camp," he said quietly. Eleanor fixed him with a steely glare. "I've been tracking lions since before you were born, Johnson. I'll tell you when I can't keep up." Marcus knew better than to argue. Eleanor had been his mentor since graduate school, and her stubbornness was legendary. Still, he worried. She'd been more withdrawn lately, spending evenings staring at old photographs rather than reviewing research data. William suddenly raised his hand, signaling for silence. He pointed to a depression in the tall grass about 50 yards ahead. Marcus raised his binoculars and felt his pulse quicken. Savannah lay in the meager shade of a withered acacia, her golden coat dull with dust and her sides heaving with rapid breaths. "Something's wrong," Marcus whispered, lowering the binoculars. "She shouldn't be breathing that fast." Eleanor took the binoculars and looked for herself. Her expression darkened. "No, she shouldn't." They approached cautiously, keeping downwind. As they drew closer, Marcus noticed dark stains on the grass where Savannah had been walking. Blood. His heart sank. "She's been injured," he said, unslinging his medical pack. "Marcus." Eleanor's voice carried a warning. "We're here to observe, not intervene." "Nature takes its course. That's been our protocol for 20 years. Marcus turned to her, disbelief coloring his features. "She's the last breeding female with the golden mane genetics. If she dies, then that's evolution," Eleanor cut in, though her voice lacked conviction. "We're scientists, not saviors." Catherine stepped forward. "With all due respect, Dr. Blackwell, my foundation is funding this project to prevent extinction, not document it. If there's something we can do, there's always something we can do," Eleanor snapped. "The question is whether we should. Intervention has consequences beyond what we can predict." Marcus studied Savannah through his binoculars again. The lioness had rolled slightly, revealing the source of her distress. A wire snare embedded in her hind leg, the metal cutting deep into flesh. A poacher's trap. "This isn't natural selection," Marcus said firmly. "This is human interference." We have a responsibility to correct it. Eleanor's objection died on her lips as William whispered urgently, "She's in labor. Look at her position." The team fell silent. Savannah was indeed showing signs of early labor, rhythmic side contractions and restless repositioning, while simultaneously fighting against the snare with weakening efforts. "If we don't help her, we lose her and all her cubs," Marcus stated flatly. Eleanor remained silent, her expression unreadable behind her sunglasses. Then she sighed, shoulders dropping slightly. "We'll need to sedate her first. The dose has to be precise, enough to calm her, but not enough to compromise the birth." Catherine looked surprised at Eleanor's acquiescence. "I thought you were against intervention?" "I'm against foolish intervention," Eleanor corrected, already preparing a syringe. "But I'm not against acknowledging when I'm wrong. Marcus is right. This isn't natural. And those cubs represent more than just Savannah's offspring. They represent hope." As Eleanor prepared the tranquilizer, Marcus found himself thinking about his mother's diary, which he'd discovered among his father's possessions after his death. His mother, Sarah Johnson, had died in childbirth when Marcus was just 8. In her final entries, she'd written about her fears, about knowing something was wrong but being told everything was fine. Her last words, scribbled hastily, "If it comes to a choice, save me. James needs his mother more than another child." But the doctors had tried to save both and lost both, his mother and the baby sister he never met. "Marcus?" Eleanor's voice pulled him back to the present. "Are you with us?" He nodded, pushing away the memory. "Yes. Sorry." William was scanning the horizon, a frown deepening the creases in his face. "We need to move quickly. Dust clouds to the northwest, vehicles coming this way." "Tourists?" Catherine asked. William shook his head grimly. "Wrong direction, wrong season, probably poachers. They follow the same patterns every year, coming through after the tourist season ends." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "How long do we have?" "Hour, maybe less," William estimated. "Winds carrying sound away from us, so they won't hear if we need to start an engine. But once they crest that ridge, they'll have clear sight lines." A decision had to be made quickly. Marcus looked at each member of his team: Catherine, eager but inexperienced; William, capable but cautious; and Eleanor, whose decades of experience had shaped conservation policy across Africa. All waiting for his call. "We help her," Marcus declared. "Catherine, prepare to document everything. This could be groundbreaking. William, set up a perimeter alert system and keep the Jeep ready for a quick exit. Eleanor, you and I will sedate and treat Savannah." As they prepared their equipment, Eleanor pulled Marcus aside. "You understand what we're risking. Not just our safety with poachers coming, but decades of non-intervention policy. If word gets out that we're actively treating wild lions—" "I know," Marcus interrupted, "but sometimes principles have to bend or they'll break entirely. There won't be any policies to uphold if there are no lions left." Eleanor studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "You sound like your father," she said so quietly Marcus almost didn't hear it. "You knew my father?" Marcus asked, surprised, but Eleanor had already turned away, focus returning to the task at hand. "First, we need to create a blind. Lions have poor eyesight but excellent sense of smell. We need to approach from downwind and move very, very slowly." Using branches and grass, they constructed a mobile blind that would allow them to approach Savannah while minimizing their human silhouette. The tranquilizer gun was loaded with a carefully measured dose, enough to make her drowsy but not unconscious. As they prepared to move in, William's radio crackled. He listened, then motioned Marcus over urgently. "Base camp reports the poachers have radioed each other," William whispered. "They're specifically looking for a pregnant lioness. They've got coordinates for this general area." "How would they know about Savannah?" Catherine asked, joining them. Marcus and Eleanor exchanged grim looks. Someone in our research network must have leaked information, Eleanor said. The cubs of a golden-maned lioness would fetch an astronomical price on the black market. Or as trophies, Marcus added bitterly. The revelation added urgency to their mission. If they retreated now, Savannah would almost certainly be captured or killed by poachers. If they stayed, they might save her and her cubs, but at significant risk to themselves. Marcus thought of his mother's diary again, her plea to be saved. He looked at Savannah, struggling against both the snare and her labor. He couldn't fail her the way the doctors had failed his mother. "We stay," he said firmly. "We help her deliver, remove the snare, and then evacuate before the poachers arrive." Eleanor nodded, a strange expression crossing her face, something like pride mixed with old sorrow. "Then let's move quickly. I've seen too many lions die in my lifetime. I don't intend to watch another go today." As they prepared to approach Savannah, Catherine adjusted her camera one final time. "This could change everything," she whispered. "If we can document a successful human intervention in a wild birth—" "Focus on the science, not the headlines," Eleanor advised sharply. "That lioness needs our help, not our ambition." With that final admonishment, they began their approach toward Savannah, whose golden eyes watched their every move with a mixture of pain, fear, and something else. Something Marcus would later swear was recognition, as if she somehow understood they were coming to help, not harm. The most dangerous rescue attempt of Marcus's career had begun, and with it, a chain of events that would alter not just the fate of a species, but the lives of everyone involved. Marcus moved forward with practiced precision, each step calculated and slow. Behind the mobile blind, his eyes never left Savannah's golden form. The lioness tracked their movement, her amber eyes reflecting pain, but showing remarkable restraint for a wild predator in distress. "She's unusually calm," Eleanor whispered, her weathered hand steady on the tranquilizer gun. "Most lions would be aggressive by now, especially a pregnant female." "She's weak," Marcus replied softly. "The snare and labor have taken their toll." 20 yards from Savannah, Eleanor raised the tranquilizer gun. "Remember, we're not trying to knock her out completely, just enough to allow treatment." Marcus nodded, his focus absolute. The dart found its mark with a soft thud, embedding in Savannah's shoulder. The lioness flinched but didn't rise. Within minutes, her eyelids began to droop, though she remained conscious. "Approach from the side, not head-on," Eleanor instructed as they abandoned the blind. "Maintain eye contact, but don't stare directly. Move with purpose, but not aggression." Marcus followed her guidance, crossing the final distance with his heart hammering against his ribs. Kneeling beside the magnificent creature, he felt a surge of awe despite the dire circumstances. Savannah's breathing was labored, her golden coat soaked with sweat around her neck and flanks. "The snare first," he decided, examining the cruel wire cutting into her hind leg. "It's restricting blood flow. She could lose the limb if we don't remove it soon." With William standing guard and Catherine documenting every moment, Marcus and Eleanor worked in perfect synchronization. Years of partnership had created an unspoken language between them. He cut the wire while Eleanor prepared antiseptic and antibiotics. "The wound's infected," Eleanor observed grimly. "Probably been trapped for days, and still managed to drag herself this far," Marcus added with newfound respect. As he treated the wound, Savannah's eyes remained fixed on him, clouded with sedation but still aware. Eleanor's hand suddenly froze over her medical kit. "Marcus," she said, her voice unusually tight. "Look at her abdominal contractions. They're too strong, too close together." He shifted his attention to Savannah's swollen belly, watching the powerful ripples of muscle beneath her skin. "She's in active labor. We may have arrived just in time." Eleanor's face paled slightly. Or too late to do anything but witness. She began unpacking additional supplies with uncharacteristic urgency. "I've seen this before," she murmured, almost to herself. 35 years ago. Different circumstances, but the same desperate struggle. Before Marcus could question her cryptic statement, William's urgent voice called from his lookout position. Vehicles approaching from the north, still a ways off but moving fast. Catherine joined them, camera in hand. "How long do we have?" 20 minutes, maybe 30, William estimated. "They're following the eastern access road." Marcus made a swift decision. "We continue, Eleanor. Can you assess how far along she is?" Eleanor hesitated, an internal struggle visible on her lined face. Then, with a deep breath, she nodded and moved to examine Savannah's condition. After a moment, she looked up, her expression grave. "First cub is in position, but something's wrong. It's not oriented correctly." She met Marcus's eyes directly. "Without intervention, she'll lose this cub and probably the rest. The birth canal is partially obstructed." "Can we help?" Marcus asked. "It's extremely risky," Eleanor replied, her professional detachment slipping to reveal genuine concern. "In a controlled environment with proper equipment, maybe." "Out here?" She glanced around at their makeshift field operation. "I wouldn't recommend it, but what? But I've done it before." Eleanor's voice had grown distant, her eyes focused on something far beyond the present moment. "A long time ago. Different circumstances." Marcus studied his mentor with growing curiosity. In 15 years of working together, Eleanor had never mentioned performing a field intervention on a laboring lioness. Before he could press further, a low moan from Savannah recaptured their attention. "She's trying to push," Marcus observed. "We need to decide now." Eleanor seemed to snap back to the present, her professional resolve returning. "We help her. Catherine, I need more light. William, keep watch, but stay close. We may need extra hands." As they prepared, Eleanor pulled Marcus aside. "The technique I'm about to show you isn't in any textbook. It's something I developed years ago but never published." "Why not?" Marcus asked. A shadow crossed Eleanor's face. "Because the circumstances were complicated. And the outcome wasn't what I'd hoped." She squeezed his arm with surprising strength. "But I've learned from those mistakes. We can do better this time." Together they returned to Savannah, who had begun to make distressed sounds despite the sedation. Eleanor guided Marcus through the delicate process of manually adjusting the cub's position, her instructions precise and confident despite the unorthodox procedure. "Gentle pressure here," she demonstrated. "We're not forcing anything, just guiding." Marcus followed her lead, amazed at the calm authority with which Eleanor worked. This was a side of his mentor he'd never witnessed. Not the academic researcher or the policy advocate, but a hands-on field veterinarian with extraordinary skills. "Where did you learn this technique?" he asked as they worked. Eleanor's hands never faltered. "Necessity is a harsh but effective teacher," she replied cryptically. Then more softly, "I was in northern Tanzania, near Lake Natron. A similar situation, though the circumstances were different." Before Marcus could inquire further, Savannah's body tensed with a powerful contraction. Eleanor nodded encouragingly. "That's it. The cub is repositioning. Next contraction should bring progress." Catherine moved closer with the camera, capturing the unprecedented intervention. "This is extraordinary," she whispered. "No one has ever documented anything like this." The next contraction came stronger than before. Savannah growled despite her sedation, her powerful body working with primal determination. With careful guidance from Eleanor and Marcus, the first cub began to emerge. "Almost there," Eleanor encouraged, though Marcus couldn't tell if she was speaking to Savannah or herself. "Just a little more." With a final push, the cub slid into the world, tiny, wet, and motionless. Marcus immediately cleared its airways and began gentle stimulation, but the small body remained still. "No heartbeat," he confirmed grimly after a moment. "Stillborn." A heavy silence fell over the team. Eleanor stared at the lifeless cub with an expression of such profound grief that Marcus was momentarily taken aback. It seemed disproportionate even for the loss of an endangered species specimen. "Eleanor?" he ventured gently. She blinked rapidly, composing herself. "Check for more cubs," she instructed, her voice rough. "There should be others." As Marcus carefully palpated Savannah's abdomen, William's urgent whisper cut through the somber atmosphere. "Vehicles getting closer. I can hear engines clearly now." "How many?" Marcus asked without looking up. "At least 3. Moving fast." Catherine stepped away to make a call on their satellite phone. "I'm contacting park rangers," she explained. "Though they're stationed on the western boundary, they won't get here in time." Marcus nodded, acknowledging their increasingly precarious situation. "I can feel at least 2 more cubs," he reported to Eleanor. "Both seem to be in better position than the first." Eleanor had regained her composure, though her eyes remained fixed on the stillborn cub for a moment longer. "We continue," she decided firmly. "I'm not giving up on her or the remaining cubs." As they prepared for the next birth, Marcus noticed Eleanor examining his technique with increasing interest. "Your hands move exactly like," she began, then stopped herself. "Like who?" Marcus prompted. Eleanor shook her head. "Like someone I knew once, someone with an intuitive understanding of animal physiology." She tilted her head, studying him. "You never did tell me where you learned your field techniques." "Certainly not from the university program." "My father," Marcus replied, surprised by the question during such a critical moment. "He wasn't a veterinarian, but he worked with livestock in Montana. Had a natural touch with animals in distress." Something flickered in Eleanor's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or confirmation of a long-held suspicion. But before she could respond, Savannah tensed with another powerful contraction. "Here comes the second," Marcus announced, refocusing on their patient. The second birth proceeded more smoothly, the cub emerging in the correct position. Unlike its sibling, this cub, a female, immediately began squirming and making tiny mewling sounds. "She's breathing," Marcus confirmed with relief. "Heart rate seems strong." Eleanor's professional demeanor couldn't quite mask her emotional response. "Place her near Savannah's head," she instructed. "The mother needs to bond with her immediately." As Marcus carefully moved the tiny cub, Catherine gasped softly. On the ridge behind them, illuminated by the late afternoon sun, stood a magnificent sight. A large male lion with a distinctive golden mane, watching their activity with intense interest. "Is that?" Catherine whispered. "Simba," William confirmed, raising his binoculars. "I'd recognize that scarred ear anywhere. He's alive." Eleanor stared in disbelief. "Impossible. The hunting party reported a kill 3 weeks ago." "Wouldn't be the first time Reynolds claimed a trophy he didn't take," William remarked grimly. "Question is, what's Simba doing here? Males typically don't attend births." "He's followed Savannah's scent," Marcus suggested. "The bond between these two has always been unusually strong." Their conversation was interrupted by Savannah's renewed distress. The third cub was coming, but something was clearly wrong. The lioness's breathing had become shallow, her body trembling with exhaustion. "She's hemorrhaging," Eleanor observed with alarm, pointing to the fresh blood pooling beneath Savannah. "We need to act quickly or we'll lose her and the remaining cub." As Marcus and Eleanor worked frantically to stabilize Savannah, William's radio crackled with static. He listened intently, then approached with grim news. That was base camp. The approaching vehicles? They're definitely Reynolds' men. They've been tracking Savannah specifically. Someone gave them her GPS coordinates from our research data. A leak in our organization? Marcus asked, his hands never stopping their work. Worse, William replied. They're saying the order came from someone with high-level access to our tracking system. Catherine paled visibly. That's impossible. Only 5 people have that level of clearance. A heavy silence fell as the implication hung in the air. The betrayal had come from within their inner circle. We'll deal with that later, Marcus decided, refocusing on the immediate crisis. Right now we need to save Savannah and this cub. Eleanor had grown unnaturally still, her expression unreadable. Then, with sudden resolution, she reached into her medical kit and withdrew a small vial Marcus didn't recognize. This will strengthen her contractions without increasing blood loss, she explained, preparing an injection. It's experimental, not yet approved for field use. Is it safe? Marcus questioned. Eleanor met his eyes directly. I've used it once before in similar circumstances. It works. Something in her tone discouraged further questions. As Eleanor administered the medication, Marcus noticed the male lion, Simba, had begun moving down the ridge toward them, his powerful body cutting a majestic silhouette against the darkening sky. William, Marcus called quietly. We may have another situation developing. William turned, saw the approaching lion, and calmly readied the second tranquilizer gun. I've got it covered. You focus on Savannah. The medication worked quickly. Within minutes, Savannah's contractions strengthened, and the third cub, a robust male, was born with surprising ease. Like his sister, he immediately began to squirm and vocalize. 2 survivors, Marcus announced with relief. Both appear healthy. As they worked to control Savannah's bleeding, the distinctive sound of vehicle engines grew louder. William's expression darkened as he scanned the horizon. They're close, 10 minutes at most. Eleanor made a swift decision. We need to move Savannah and the cubs. If Reynolds' men find them here in this vulnerable state, moving her could kill her, Marcus objected. She's lost too much blood. Staying will definitely kill her, Eleanor countered. Reynolds doesn't leave witnesses, animal or human. Catherine stepped forward. My father isn't a monster, she said quietly. 3 heads turned simultaneously to stare at her. Your father? Marcus repeated, certain he'd misheard. Catherine Miller's composed exterior cracked slightly. Victor Reynolds is my father. That's why I funded this project, to protect what he's trying to destroy. She met their shocked expressions with defiance. I've been trying to change him for years. When reason failed, I thought showing him documented evidence of these magnificent creatures might succeed where my words couldn't. The revelation stunned Marcus into momentary silence. Before he could respond, a low growl reminded them of Simba's approach. The male lion had stopped 30 yards away, his posture alert but not aggressive. He's protecting his family, Eleanor observed softly, even against his own instincts to avoid humans. The parallels weren't lost on Marcus. A father returning against all odds, a family fighting for survival, the complex web of loyalties and betrayals surrounding them. As he processed Catherine's revelation and Simba's unexpected appearance, Marcus made the most difficult decision of his career. We stand our ground, he declared. We protect Savannah and her cubs from the poachers, and we document everything. If Reynolds wants these lions, he'll have to go through us first. Eleanor studied him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Pride mixed with something deeper, more personal. You really are your father's son, she murmured. The comment struck Marcus as odd. Eleanor had never met his father. But before he could question her, the radio crackled again with an urgent message from base camp. 3 vehicles approaching your position from the north, heavily armed. ETA 7 minutes. The team exchanged determined looks. The turning point had arrived. Retreat was no longer an option. Whatever happened next would change not only the fate of Savannah and her cubs, but possibly the course of lion conservation forever. As they prepared to face the approaching threat, Eleanor placed a weathered hand on Marcus's shoulder. "There's something you should know," she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Something I should have told you years ago." But the moment of revelation was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of approaching engines. The confrontation they had feared was now imminent, forcing Eleanor's secret to remain unspoken as they turned to face a more immediate danger. The next hour unfolded in a blur of calculated decisions and adrenaline. Marcus and Eleanor worked swiftly to stabilize Savannah, administering fluids through an IV line while monitoring her vital signs. The two surviving cubs, one female, one male, had been cleaned and placed near their mother's head, where they mewled softly against her warm fur. "Her bleeding has slowed," Eleanor reported, checking the gauze pads. "The medication is working." Catherine stood a few yards away, phone pressed to her ear, her hushed voice carrying urgency. "Dad, please listen. I'm at the location with Dr. Johnson's team. The Lioness has given birth. Yes, I know what you planned, but no. You don't understand." Marcus caught Eleanor's eye. "Can we trust her?" Eleanor studied Catherine thoughtfully. "The question isn't whether we can trust her intentions. It's whether she has any influence over her father. Reynolds has been hunting lions for 40 years. Old habits die hard." William approached from his lookout position, rifle slung casually over his shoulder. Despite the weapon, there was nothing threatening about his demeanor, just the practiced readiness of a man who had spent decades in the bush. "They've stopped about a mile out," he reported. "Unusual behavior for poachers. They typically move fast, hit hard, and disappear." "They're waiting for something," Marcus concluded. "Or someone." Catherine rejoined them, her expression troubled. "My father is with them. He wants to speak with me alone." "Absolutely not," Marcus responded immediately. "It's too dangerous." "He gave his word he wouldn't harm me," Catherine insisted. "And despite everything, my father has never broken a promise to me." Eleanor intervened before Marcus could object further. "What exactly does he want, Catherine?" "He claims this isn't about trophies." Catherine's voice held a note of confusion. "He says it's about something that happened 35 years ago, something involving lions from this same genetic line." An odd expression crossed Eleanor's weathered face, recognition mixed with something that looked almost like fear. "Did he mention anything else?" "Only that he needs to see the cubs. And—" Catherine hesitated. "He asked if Dr. Blackwell was with us. He seemed particularly interested in that." Marcus turned to Eleanor, whose usual composure had visibly faltered. "Eleanor? What's going on? Do you know Reynolds?" Eleanor's gaze remained fixed on the distant dust cloud marking the poacher's position. "We've crossed paths," she admitted. "A long time ago. Professional disagreements about conservation approaches." Something in her tone suggested there was far more to the story, but before Marcus could press further, Savannah stirred restlessly. The sedation was wearing off, making her increasingly aware of the humans surrounding her cubs. "We need to back away," Marcus instructed. "Give her space while maintaining the medical line." As they carefully retreated to a respectful distance, the male lion, Simba, had inched closer, now just 20 yards away. His massive head was raised, nostrils flaring as he assessed the situation. "He's remarkably calm," William observed. "Most males I've tracked would be charging by now, especially with cubs present." "He knows we helped," Catherine suggested. "Animals can sense intention." Eleanor shook her head. "Lions don't rationalize like humans, but they do recognize patterns and remember interactions. This particular male has had more positive human contact than most wild lions. Our research team has been monitoring his pride for years without interference." Marcus studied Simba thoughtfully. "Until Reynolds and his hunting party arrived 3 weeks ago." A heavy silence fell over the group. The unspoken question hung in the air. How had Simba survived an encounter with professional hunters? And why was Victor Reynolds now specifically tracking this family? Catherine's phone chimed with a message. "My father says he's coming in alone," she announced. "He wants us to stand down our weapons." William snorted. "Like hell we will. We maintain our position," Marcus decided. "William, keep your rifle ready but not aimed. We don't want to escalate unnecessarily." As they debated their next move, Eleanor had moved slightly apart from the group. Marcus noticed her withdrawing a small, worn photograph from her vest pocket, studying it briefly before tucking it away again. Her expression was unreadable, but the slight tremor in her usually steady hands betrayed her inner turmoil. In the distance, a single vehicle had detached from the others, approaching slowly along the rutted track. Through his binoculars, Marcus could make out a solitary figure behind the wheel. "That's him," Catherine confirmed. "My father always drives himself, never trusts anyone else behind the wheel." As the Land Rover drew closer, Marcus got his first clear look at Victor Reynolds. At 62, the infamous trophy hunter cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered with a shock of silver hair and a closely trimmed beard. He wore khaki hunting clothes that had seen real use, not the pristine outfits of weekend safari tourists. The vehicle stopped 50 yards away, and Reynolds stepped out unarmed. He raised both hands slightly to show they were empty, then began walking toward them with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding respect. "Catherine," he called, his voice carrying easily across the distance, "I gave explicit instructions for you to meet me alone." "And I chose to ignore them," Catherine replied evenly. "These people are my colleagues, Dad." "Whatever you have to say, you can say it to all of us." Reynolds continued his approach, his gaze sweeping over their makeshift medical station before landing on Savannah and her cubs. Something like recognition flickered in his eyes. "So it's true," he murmured. "The Golden Mane gene lives on." Then his attention shifted to Eleanor, and his expression hardened. "Dr. Blackwell, it's been a long time." "Not long enough, Victor," Eleanor replied coolly. Marcus looked between them, increasingly confused by their apparent history. "Would someone please explain what's going on?" Reynolds ignored him, his focus remaining on Eleanor. 35 years, and you're still interfering with nature's course. Some things never change. While other things change too much, Eleanor countered. Like a conservationist becoming a trophy hunter. The barb struck home. Reynolds's jaw tightened visibly. "We both made choices after Lake Natron. Mine were just more honest." The mention of Lake Natron caused Eleanor to pale slightly. Marcus had never seen his mentor rattled before, and the sight was deeply unsettling. "Lake Natron?" he questioned. "What happened there?" "Ask her," Reynolds replied, nodding toward Eleanor. "Ask her about the research expedition of 1990, about the pregnant lioness she tried to save and the price that was paid." Eleanor's voice cut through the tension like a whip. "Enough, Victor. That's ancient history." "Is it?" Reynolds turned his attention to Marcus, studying him with uncomfortable intensity. "How old are you, Dr. Johnson?" 38, Marcus answered automatically, then immediately wondered why he'd responded. Reynolds nodded slowly, as if confirming a long-held suspicion. "And where did you grow up? After your father died?" "Montana, with my aunt," Marcus replied, increasingly uneasy. "What does this have to do with anything?" "Everything," Reynolds said simply. Then, turning back to Eleanor, "You never told him, did you?" Eleanor stepped forward, placing herself between Reynolds and Marcus. "This isn't the time or place, Victor. We have a critically wounded lioness and 2 vulnerable cubs. Whatever grievance you're carrying, it can wait." For a tense moment, Reynolds seemed ready to push further. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. Fair enough. The animals come first. On that, at least, we can still agree. He surveyed their field operation with a professional eye. Your technique has improved since Lake Natron, he observed. The Lioness looks stable. No thanks to your snares, Marcus interjected sharply. Reynolds turned to him with a frown. My snares? I don't use wire traps. Too indiscriminate, too cruel. Then whose trap nearly killed her? Catherine demanded. Locals, most likely, William suggested from his position a few yards away. There's been increased poaching from the eastern villages since the drought began. People are desperate. Reynolds nodded in agreement. Subsistence poaching has tripled this year. It's why I've been tracking this particular lioness to relocate her and her mate to the northern conservation area. Marcus stared at him incredulously. You expect us to believe you came all this way to protect a lion? You, Victor Reynolds, who's shot more big cats than anyone in the safari industry? Believe what you want, Reynolds replied evenly. But ask yourself this. If I wanted this lioness dead, why would I announce my presence? Why approach unarmed? He gestured toward the hills. My men could have taken her from half a mile away, yet here I stand, talking instead of shooting. The logic was hard to dismiss, but Marcus remained skeptical. Then why the secrecy? Why not coordinate with our research team? A bitter smile crossed Reynolds' face. Would you have welcomed my help? Or would you have immediately assumed the worst, exactly as you're doing now? Before Marcus could respond, a low growl drew everyone's attention. Simba had moved closer during their conversation, now standing protectively near Savannah and the cubs. His powerful body was tense, golden eyes fixed on Reynolds. He remembers me, Reynolds observed quietly. You claim to have shot him 3 weeks ago, Catherine said. Reynolds shook his head. I claimed no such thing. My clients wanted to believe they'd taken down the legendary golden-maned lion. I saw no reason to correct them when we returned to camp with a different male. William had been watching this exchange with increasing interest. So you deliberately misled your clients? Why? Because this particular lion needed to disappear from official records, Reynolds explained. Too many people were tracking him, including some who don't share your conservation ethics. The revelation shifted the dynamic. Marcus glanced at Eleanor, whose expression suggested she was reassessing her long-held assumptions about her former colleague. Savannah's sudden movement interrupted the tense conversation. The sedation had worn off completely, and she was now fully alert. Her protective instincts activated. She pulled herself up despite her weakness, positioning her body between the humans and her cubs. We need to back away, Marcus instructed urgently. All of us. Give her space. As they retreated, Simba approached his mate, greeting her with a gentle headbutt that spoke volumes about their bond. Savannah responded with a soft chuff, allowing him to inspect the cubs. The family reunion was both touching and remarkable. Male lions typically showed little interest in newborns. I've never seen anything like it, Catherine whispered, raising her camera to document the interaction. I have, Eleanor said softly. Once before. Same genetic line. Reynolds nodded in agreement. The Natron pride. They displayed the same abnormal family bonding behaviors. Marcus looked between them, frustrated by the cryptic references. Would someone please explain what happened at Lake Natron that connects all of this? Eleanor and Reynolds exchanged a long look, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Eleanor sighed. Victor and I were research partners in the late 1980s, she began. We were studying a unique pride of lions near Lake Natron that exhibited unusual social behaviors, particularly strong pair bonding and paternal involvement with cubs. The golden mane gene, Reynolds continued, was linked to these behavioral differences. We theorized it might represent an evolutionary adaptation, a new subspecies emerging. Then a severe drought hit in 1990, Eleanor picked up the story. The pride was struggling. The last breeding female was pregnant and injured, similar to Savannah today. We disagreed about intervention, Reynolds added. I wanted to tranquilize her, bring her to our research station. Eleanor insisted on field treatment, arguing that removing her from her pride would cause too much stress. So what happened? Marcus pressed. Eleanor's voice grew distant. I attempted an emergency field delivery. There were complications. The lioness died, along with 2 of her 3 cubs, her hands clasped together tightly. The male cub survived initially, but the father was shot by poachers the next day. Without protection, we assumed the cub perished as well. But you never found its body, Reynolds interjected, despite searching for weeks. An uncomfortable silence descended as Marcus processed this information. And this connects to our current situation how, exactly? Before either Eleanor or Reynolds could respond, William's urgent voice cut through the tension. Movement on the eastern ridge. Multiple figures. Not our people. Reynolds tensed immediately. My men are supposed to be holding position to the north. Those aren't your men, William confirmed, peering through his binoculars. Different vehicles, heavier weapons. Damn it, Reynolds muttered. They followed us. Who followed you? Marcus demanded. Zhao's people, Reynolds replied grimly. Chinese syndicate. They've been trying to acquire lion cubs with the golden mane gene for a private zoo. They approached me months ago as a potential supplier. And you agreed? Catherine asked, her voice sharp with accusation. Reynolds shook his head. I played along to track their operation. They've been responsible for the deaths of dozens of lions across Tanzania and Kenya in the past year. The situation had suddenly become far more dangerous. Marcus quickly assessed their options, none of them good. Savannah was in no condition to move, and the cubs were too vulnerable for transport. Staying meant potentially facing armed poachers, but fleeing meant abandoning the lions they'd worked so hard to save. As they deliberated, an unexpected development occurred. Simba, apparently sensing the approaching threat, had positioned himself on a small rise overlooking their location. His posture was alert, head raised as he scanned the eastern ridge where William had spotted movement. He's standing guard, Catherine observed with wonder. He knows there's danger coming. Eleanor watched the male lion with a mixture of professional interest and something deeper, almost like recognition. The Natron Pride males did the same thing. They could anticipate threats long before humans detected them. Reynolds checked his watch, then turned to Marcus with unexpected deference. Dr. Johnson, you're in charge of this operation. What's your call? The question surprised Marcus, who had expected continued conflict rather than collaboration. He considered their limited options before responding. We protect Savannah and the cubs at all costs, he decided. William, contact base camp. Tell them to send whatever security personnel they have available. Catherine, keep documenting everything. We'll need evidence of what happens here. Eleanor, continue monitoring Savannah's condition. And me? Reynolds asked. Marcus studied him for a moment, weighing old suspicions against current necessities. Contact your men. We need every advantage we can get. As the team dispersed to their assigned tasks, Eleanor approached Marcus privately. There's something else you should know, she began, her voice low. Something about Lake Natron that I've never told anyone. I'm listening, Marcus replied, his attention divided between her words and the activity on the distant ridge. Eleanor took a deep breath. The researcher who was with me during the Lioness's delivery at Lake Natron, his name was James Johnson. Marcus froze, his father's name hanging in the air between them. My father was with you in Tanzania? He asked slowly. You knew my father? Eleanor nodded, her eyes revealing decades of carefully guarded emotion. James and I worked together for 3 years. He was brilliant, intuitive with animals in a way I've only seen in one other person. Her gaze met his meaningfully. You. Before Marcus could process this revelation, William's urgent voice called from the perimeter. "Vehicles moving! They're coming in fast from multiple directions!" The moment for personal discoveries had passed. Whatever secrets remained about Lake Natron and his father's connection to Eleanor would have to wait. The immediate threat demanded their full attention as the development of their story accelerated toward an inevitable confrontation. Marcus looked once more at Savannah and her cubs, then at Simba, standing vigilant on the rise. These magnificent creatures represented not just the future of their species, but something more personal that he couldn't yet fully grasp. Whatever happened next, he was committed to their survival, regardless of the cost. "Everyone take positions," he ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "We protect this family at all costs." As the team prepared for the approaching threat, the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the Serengeti plain. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only their courage, but the unexpected bonds forming between species, and between humans with a shared, mysterious past. Dust clouds billowed on the horizon as 3 black SUVs tore across the savannah, their engines roaring like predators. Marcus positioned himself between the approaching vehicles and Savannah, his heart pounding but his hands steady. Around him, the unlikely alliance had formed a protective perimeter, Eleanor monitoring the Lioness, William with his rifle at the ready, Catherine documenting everything, and Reynolds speaking urgently into his satellite phone. "My men are moving to intercept from the north," Reynolds reported, lowering the phone. "5 minutes out, but Zhao's people will reach us first." "How many?" Marcus asked, not taking his eyes off the approaching threat. "Typically 6 to 8 men, well armed, former military, mostly Ugandan and Sudanese mercenaries." Reynolds checked his own weapon, a high-caliber hunting rifle he'd retrieved from his vehicle. "They won't hesitate to kill anyone in their way." Marcus absorbed this grim assessment. "What do they want with the cubs specifically?" "The golden mane gene is believed to carry significant value in certain markets," Reynolds explained. "Private collectors, experimental breeding programs, traditional medicine. A living cub could be worth upwards of $2 million. Catherine's eyes widened. "That's insane." "That's economics," Reynolds replied flatly. "Rarity creates value." The SUVs were now close enough to make out individual figures inside, men with hard expressions and tactical gear. Marcus made a rapid decision. "William, Eleanor, move Savannah and the cubs behind that outcropping," he directed, pointing to a natural stone formation that offered some protection. "Catherine, go with them, keep filming. Reynolds and I will engage them here. Buy you time." Eleanor started to object, but Marcus cut her off. "This isn't negotiable. Savannah can barely stand, and the cubs can't survive without her." "They need protection more than we do." With reluctant nods, Eleanor and William began the delicate process of moving the weakened Lioness. Savannah growled in protest, but allowed herself to be guided, seeming to understand their urgent intent. Catherine followed, camera steady despite her obvious fear. As they retreated, Marcus turned to Reynolds. "Why are you helping us?" "Really?" Reynolds checked his ammunition before answering. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in seeing these cubs survive." "That's not good enough," Marcus pressed. "Not with our lives on the line." Reynolds met his gaze directly. "Because 35 years ago, I made the wrong choice at Lake Natron. I chose science over compassion, data over life. I've regretted it every day since." He looked toward Eleanor's retreating figure. "And because Eleanor Blackwell was right, even though I spent decades telling myself she wasn't." Before Marcus could respond, the lead SUV skidded to a halt 70 yards away. 2 men emerged immediately, weapons raised, not the usual crude firearms of local poachers, but military-grade assault rifles with advanced optics. "Dr. Johnson, a voice called out in accented English. "We know you have the lions. Surrender them, and no one needs to be harmed." The speaker stepped forward, a tall, lean man with close-cropped hair and the disciplined posture of someone with military training. His expression was neither cruel nor compassionate, merely professional. "Commander Kalu, I presume," Reynolds called back, recognition in his voice. The man nodded slightly. "Mr. Reynolds, unexpected to find you here. Our employer believed you were cooperating with our operation." "I'm afraid your employer misunderstood my position," Reynolds replied evenly. Kalu's expression hardened. "This is unfortunate. We have strict orders regarding those cubs." More men emerged from the vehicles, spreading out in a practiced formation. Marcus counted 8 armed individuals, overwhelming odds by any measure. "The cubs stay with their mother," Marcus stated firmly. "They're part of an ongoing research project protected by international law and the Tanzanian government." Kalu smiled thinly. "International law holds little sway where we stand, Dr. Johnson. And as for the Tanzanian government," he gestured dismissively, "arrangements have been made with the appropriate officials." The implication of corruption was clear and not entirely surprising. Conservation efforts often battled not just poachers but the very systems meant to protect wildlife. "Last chance," Kalu announced, his men moving into position. "Surrender the cubs or we take them by force." Marcus felt a presence beside him and turned to find Simba had descended from his lookout position. The massive lion stood just yards away, his golden eyes fixed on the intruders, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "That's close enough," Marcus called to Kalu, drawing confidence from the lion's unexpected support. "Any closer, and you'll have more than humans to deal with." Kalu assessed the situation, clearly surprised by the male lion's behavior. "The cat will be shot if it interferes," he warned. "Our orders are specific. We leave with those cubs, one way or another." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, neither side willing to retreat. Behind them, Eleanor had successfully moved Savannah and the cubs to the relative safety of the stone outcropping, but everyone knew it was merely a temporary reprieve. Suddenly, the radio at Reynolds' belt crackled to life. "2 minutes out, north approach," came a clipped voice. "Confirm position." Hope flickered as Reynolds responded with coordinates. His men were close. If they could just hold out a little longer. But Kalu had heard the transmission. With a sharp gesture to his team, he gave an order that needed no translation. The mercenaries began advancing, weapons raised. "Get down!" Reynolds shouted, pushing Marcus behind the cover of a nearby boulder just as the first shots rang out. The sound of gunfire shattered the savannah's evening calm. Birds erupted from nearby trees, and somewhere in the distance a herd of antelope fled in panic. Marcus pressed himself against the sun-warmed stone, heart hammering in his chest. Beside him, Reynolds returned fire with practiced precision. "Stay down," he ordered Marcus. "When I give the signal, run for the outcropping." "What about you?" Marcus asked. Reynolds' expression was grimly determined. "I'll cover you. My men will be here any minute." Before Marcus could protest, a terrifying roar cut through the gunfire. Simba had charged the advancing mercenaries, his massive form a blur of muscle and fury. The unexpected attack sent the men scrambling backward, momentarily disrupting their coordinated advance. "Now!" Reynolds shouted. "Run!" Marcus sprinted for the outcropping where Eleanor and the others had taken shelter. Bullets kicked up dust at his heels, but Simba's intervention had created enough chaos to give him a chance. He dove behind the rocks, landing hard beside Eleanor. "Marcus," she exclaimed, hands immediately checking him for injuries. "Are you hit?" "I'm fine," he gasped, peering back toward the battle. "Reynolds is still out there, and Simba—" The male lion was performing an incredible feat of strategic aggression, charging, retreating, circling, keeping the mercenaries off balance without fully committing to a lethal engagement. It was behavior rarely seen in wild lions, who typically avoided human confrontations entirely. "He's protecting his family," Eleanor murmured, watching in amazement. Just like the Natron males. William had positioned himself at the edge of their shelter, rifle ready. "Reynolds is pinned down," he reported tensely. "Can't reach us without crossing open ground." Catherine continued filming, her hands remarkably steady despite the danger. "This is incredible," she whispered. "A wild lion actively defending humans against other humans. It's unprecedented." "Not unprecedented," Eleanor corrected quietly. "I've seen it once before." Before she could elaborate, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors cut through the gunfire. All eyes turned skyward as a sleek black helicopter appeared over the ridge, bearing the logo of the Tanzanian Wildlife Authority. "Park rangers?" Marcus asked hopefully. William shook his head. "Not their usual equipment. Someone with serious resources called in that bird." The helicopter's arrival changed the dynamics instantly. Kalu and his men began retreating toward their vehicles, clearly unwilling to face this new development. As they fell back, Reynolds seized the opportunity to dash toward the outcropping, zigzagging to avoid the diminishing gunfire. He dove in beside Marcus, breathing heavily. "Perfect timing," he gasped. "Your men?" Marcus asked. Reynolds shook his head. "Not mine. I don't have that kind of air support." He turned to Catherine with newfound respect. "You called in the cavalry, didn't you?" Catherine nodded, lowering her camera momentarily. "Emergency protocol. My foundation maintains a rapid response team for situations exactly like this." The helicopter descended to a hover position above the retreating mercenaries, its searchlight pinning them in harsh white illumination. An amplified voice boomed from the aircraft. "This is a protected wildlife zone. Drop your weapons immediately." For a tense moment, it seemed Kalu might order his men to fire on the helicopter. Then, with visible reluctance, he signaled them to stand down. One by one, they placed their weapons on the ground. "It worked," Catherine breathed in disbelief. "They're surrendering." "Don't celebrate yet," William cautioned. "Mercenaries like that always have contingency plans." As if confirming his warning, Kalu suddenly broke from the group, sprinting not toward the vehicles but directly toward the outcropping, toward Savannah and her cubs. "He's going for the lions!" Marcus shouted, launching himself forward to intercept. The two men collided in the open ground between the rocks and the surrendering mercenaries. Kalu was trained, powerful, and driven by the knowledge that failure meant severe consequences from his employer. Marcus was fueled by something more primal, the same protective instinct that had driven Simba to defend his family. They grappled in the dust, each seeking advantage. Kalu landed a solid blow to Marcus's ribs, driving the air from his lungs. In return, Marcus managed to land a desperate punch that split the mercenary's lip. Blood flowed, and Kalu's expression turned from professional detachment to personal rage. "You should have taken the offer," he snarled, reaching for a concealed knife at his belt. The blade flashed in the fading light as Kalu lunged forward. Marcus twisted desperately, feeling the knife slice through his shirt and graze his side. Hot pain bloomed, but adrenaline kept him moving, kept him fighting. From the outcropping, Eleanor watched in horror as Marcus struggled against the trained killer. Without hesitation, she grabbed William's rifle and stepped forward. "Eleanor, no!" William shouted. "You're not a marksman!" But Eleanor was already taking aim, her weathered hands steadier than anyone expected. She drew a deep breath, finger tightening on the trigger. A golden blur erupted from the rocks, crossing the distance in powerful bounds. Simba hit Kalu with the full force of his massive body, sending both man and knife tumbling across the dirt. The mercenary screamed as powerful jaws clamped around his arm. Not a killing bite, but a restraint. Simba held him pinned, growling deep in his chest, eyes fixed on the human beneath his paws. "Don't move!" Marcus gasped, staggering to his feet and clutching his bleeding side. "He won't kill you unless you give him reason to." Kalu froze, terror replacing the rage in his eyes. The helicopter had now landed, and armed security personnel in tactical gear were securing the other mercenaries. Catherine's rapid response team was indeed professional and thorough. With the immediate threat contained, Marcus turned his attention back to Savannah and her cubs. The lioness had used the last of her strength to drag herself to the entrance of their rocky shelter, positioning herself to defend her offspring despite her weakened state. Her golden eyes watched the confrontation, alert and intelligent. "It's over," Marcus told her softly, knowing she couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone might convey the message. "You're safe now." Eleanor approached cautiously, medical kit in hand. "You're bleeding," she observed, nodding toward Marcus's side. "Just a graze," he dismissed. "Savannah needs attention more than I do." Together they returned to the Lioness, checking her condition while Catherine's security team secured the area. Simba maintained his hold on Kalu until one of the tactical team members approached with restraints, at which point the lion released the mercenary and backed away. Behavior so extraordinary that even the professional security personnel seemed momentarily stunned. "I've never seen anything like it," the team leader admitted, watching Simba return to Savannah's side. "It's like he understands exactly what's happening." "Perhaps he does," Eleanor mused. These lions have always been different. As the chaos settled, the full security team established a perimeter around their position. Medical personnel attended to Marcus's wound despite his protests, and Catherine coordinated with authorities via satellite phone. Reynolds, who had helped secure the mercenaries, now approached Marcus with newfound respect. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever witnessed," he remarked, "charging an armed mercenary to protect a lion." "Says the man who did exactly the same thing 35 years ago," Eleanor interjected, not looking up from her examination of Savannah. Reynolds fell silent, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. With the immediate danger past, Marcus finally had a moment to process the events of the past hours and the revelations that had emerged. He turned to Eleanor, who was gently checking the cubs while Savannah watched with surprising tolerance. "You knew my father," he said simply. "You worked with him at Lake Natron." Eleanor's hands stilled briefly, then continued their careful examination of the male cub. "Yes," she acknowledged. "James was my research partner for 3 years. "And more than that," Reynolds added quietly. Eleanor shot him a warning glance, but Reynolds continued. "He deserves to know, Eleanor. After all these years, after what just happened here, he deserves the truth." Marcus looked between them, sensing the weight of unspoken history. "What truth? What aren't you telling me about my father?" Eleanor straightened, her professional demeanor momentarily giving way to something more vulnerable, an expression Marcus had never seen on his mentor's face. "Your father didn't die in Montana when you were 8, she said finally, her voice barely audible above the ambient sounds of the Savannah evening. "He died here, in Tanzania, at Lake Natron, trying to protect a lioness and her cub." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. "That's impossible. I remember his funeral. You remember what your aunt told you?" Eleanor interrupted gently. "What she believed herself. James's body was never recovered after the attack. He was presumed dead, and with no way to contact his family directly." "The story was simplified," Reynolds finished. "A climbing accident in Montana instead of a lion attack in Tanzania. Easier for a child to process and for a rural American family in the pre-internet era." Marcus struggled to reconcile this new information with his childhood memories. "If that's true, then—" A sudden commotion from Savannah interrupted their conversation. The lioness was struggling to stand, her attention fixed on something beyond their perimeter. Following her gaze, Marcus spotted a remarkable sight. A rare white lion standing on the ridge, its pale coat luminous in the last rays of sunlight. "Another male?" Catherine whispered, raising her camera. "Impossible," William muttered. Males don't tolerate each other in the same territory. Yet the evidence stood before them. The white lion, massive and majestic, surveyed their position without aggression. More surprisingly, Simba showed no territorial response. Instead, he moved to stand beside Savannah, both lions watching the newcomer with what appeared to be recognition. "The genetic line manifests in multiple ways," Eleanor explained, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding the personal tension. "The golden mane is one expression, the white coat is another, even rarer variant." "But why isn't Simba challenging him?" Marcus pressed. Eleanor and Reynolds exchanged a meaningful look. "Because they're related," Reynolds suggested. "Possibly brothers from the same litter." "The surviving cub from Lake Natron," Eleanor whispered. "All these years, I thought he perished after his father was killed." The white lion began descending the ridge, moving with deliberate grace toward their position. The security team raised their weapons uncertainly. "Hold your fire," Marcus ordered. "He's not showing aggression." The scene unfolding before them defied conventional wildlife behavior. 3 adult lions, Savannah, Simba, and now this white male, gathered around the newborn cubs without conflict. It was a family reunion that shouldn't have been possible, according to everything known about lion sociology. "The Natron pride genetics," Eleanor murmured, watching in awe. "The same abnormal bonding behaviors, the same intelligence, after all these years." As the white lion approached the cubs, Marcus noticed something unusual around its neck. What appeared to be an old, weathered leather cord. Eleanor gasped when she saw it. "That's James's field cord," she whispered. "He used it to secure his research notes." "He was wearing it the day he disappeared." The pieces began falling into place, a 35-year-old mystery connecting to the present moment through generations of lions and humans alike. The white lion gently nudged the male cub, who squeaked in response. Savannah watched with apparent trust, allowing this interaction with her newborn. "I think," Marcus said slowly, the enormity of the realization dawning on him, "that we're witnessing something unprecedented, not just in lion behavior, but in the connection between humans and wildlife." As the climactic confrontation settled into this moment of wonder, the helicopter's searchlight illuminated the gathering of lions, golden, white, and newborn, creating an image of such power and beauty that even the hardened security personnel seemed moved. Catherine captured it all, tears streaming down her face as she documented what would indeed become wildlife history. The sun's final rays slipped below the horizon, casting the savannah in purple twilight. In that moment, surrounded by danger and wonder in equal measure, Marcus felt a profound connection not only to these magnificent creatures but to his own hidden past, a past that had somehow led him full circle to this exact place, this exact pride of lions, and the truth about his father's final act of courage. As darkness enveloped the Serengeti, the security team established a perimeter with portable lights, creating an island of illumination amid the vast African night. Medical personnel had set up a makeshift treatment area where they attended to Marcus's wound, deeper than he'd initially admitted. The knife had sliced through his side, requiring several stitches. "You should have said something sooner," Eleanor scolded, watching the medic work. Her stern tone couldn't mask the concern in her eyes. Typical Johnson stubbornness. Marcus managed a weak smile despite the pain. "Apparently it runs in the family." The comment hung between them, laden with unspoken questions. Since Eleanor's revelation about his father, they'd had no opportunity for further discussion. The immediate needs of Savannah and security concerns had taken precedence, but Marcus felt the weight of untold history pressing down on him with each passing minute. Nearby, Savannah rested with her cubs nestled against her side. The veterinary team Catherine had summoned with her security force had administered antibiotics and additional fluids, improving the lioness's condition significantly. Simba kept vigilant watch from a few yards away, while the white lion, whom William had taken to calling Ghost, maintained a respectful distance at the edge of the lighted area. "Her vital signs are stabilizing," reported Dr. Amina Cohn, the wildlife veterinarian who had arrived with the helicopter. "The cubs are nursing successfully. I believe they will survive if we can keep them protected for the next 48 hours. "Thank you, Doctor," Catherine acknowledged, lowering her camera for the first time in hours. She looked exhausted but determined, the adrenaline of their ordeal gradually giving way to bone-deep fatigue. "My foundation will ensure they have whatever resources they need." Reynolds approached from the security perimeter, his expression grim. "Kalu is talking. Says Zhao hired him specifically to acquire cubs with the golden mane gene. They've been monitoring our research data for months, tracking Savannah's pregnancy." "Which means we still have a leak in our organization," Marcus concluded, wincing as the medic tightened a bandage around his torso. "Or in mine," Catherine admitted reluctantly. "The Foundation has access to all the tracking data." The thought of betrayal from within their own ranks was disturbing but not entirely surprising. With the amounts of money involved in illegal wildlife trafficking, corruption could infiltrate even the most dedicated conservation teams. As the medic finished his work, Marcus carefully pulled his torn shirt back on and stood, testing his mobility. The pain was manageable, dulled by local anesthetic and oral painkillers. He made his way to where Eleanor sat alone, staring at the white lion with an expression of wonder mixed with old sorrow. "We need to talk," Marcus said simply, lowering himself beside her. Eleanor nodded, her eyes never leaving the magnificent pale lion. "Yes, we do." She took a deep breath. "I've owed you this conversation for 30 years. "Tell me about my father," Marcus requested. "The real story, not the Montana climbing accident I grew up believing." Eleanor's weathered hands twisted together in her lap, an uncharacteristic display of nervousness from a woman known for her unshakable composure. "James Johnson was the finest field researcher I ever knew," she began. "Brilliant, intuitive, fearless. He could approach wild lions in ways no one else dared, seemed to communicate with them on some level none of us understood." "Like what happened today with Simba," Marcus observed. "Yes, exactly like that." Eleanor smiled faintly at the memory. "Your father had a theory that certain lion prides, particularly those with the golden mane genetic marker, possessed higher intelligence and more complex social structures than science had recognized. Most researchers dismissed his ideas as anthropomorphism, but James was convinced. And you?" "I was skeptical at first. Then I saw the evidence with my own eyes at Lake Natron." She glanced toward Savannah and her cubs. A pride that defied conventional lion behavior. Males that remained with the pride year-round, shared parenting responsibilities, demonstrated problem-solving abilities beyond what we thought possible. Reynolds approached quietly, adding his perspective. The scientific community wasn't ready for James's theories. It threatened too many established views about animal cognition, but he was on to something revolutionary. "So what happened at Lake Natron?" Marcus pressed. "How did my father die?" Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, summoning the courage to revisit her most painful memory. "We were tracking a pregnant lioness, the last breeding female of the Natron pride. She'd been injured in a territorial dispute, and her condition was deteriorating. Like Savannah today," Marcus noted. "Remarkably similar circumstances," Eleanor agreed. "James wanted to intervene immediately, I was hesitant, worried about setting precedents for human intervention in natural processes. Victor, she nodded toward Reynolds, argued for capturing her and bringing her to our research station. We lost precious time debating, Reynolds admitted, his usual confidence subdued by remorse. By the time we reached a decision, the Lioness was in critical condition. Eleanor continued, her voice growing strained. We attempted an emergency field delivery. There were complications. Severe hemorrhaging. We managed to deliver 3 cubs, 2 stillborn, 1 alive. But the mother died, despite our efforts. "And my father?" Marcus asked quietly. "The pride's dominant male returned during the procedure," Reynolds explained. "Found us with his dead mate and the surviving cub. He attacked." "James placed himself between the lion and the rest of us," Eleanor said, a single tear tracking down her weathered cheek. "He created enough distraction for Victor to get me and the surviving cub to safety. By the time reinforcements arrived, there was no sign of James, only blood and scattered equipment." The brutal reality of his father's final moments hit Marcus with physical force. He'd grown up picturing a quick, clean death on a Montana mountainside. The truth was far more violent, yet also more meaningful. His father had died protecting others, human and lion alike. "We searched for days," Reynolds added. "Found no body, no remains. The assumption was that scavengers had—" He left the grim conclusion unspoken. "And the surviving cub?" Marcus asked, glancing toward the white lion watching them from the shadows. "I raised him at our research station," Eleanor replied. "Against all protocol, against scientific consensus about imprinting. I named him James." Her voice broke slightly. "When he was old enough, we released him back into the wild with a tracking collar. He thrived initially, but after 6 months the collar stopped transmitting. We assumed he had died. Yet here he is," Marcus said wonderingly, 35 years later. "With your father's field cord around his neck," Eleanor added softly. "I gave it to the cub as a comfort item during those early days. It carried James's scent." The implications were extraordinary. A lion carrying a human artifact for 3 decades, returning precisely when another lioness of his genetic line faced identical circumstances. Science would struggle to explain it as anything but coincidence, yet everyone present sensed something more profound at work. "After we lost the cub's signal, I tried to continue your father's research," Eleanor continued, "but funding dried up. The scientific community moved on. Eventually, I returned to conventional conservation work, focusing on population studies rather than cognition." "And I went the opposite direction," Reynolds interjected. "Became what I once fought against. Started guiding trophy hunts, telling myself it was sustainable conservation through selective culling." "But you never hunted lions with golden manes," Marcus observed, the pieces falling into place. Reynolds nodded. "Never. And when rumors surfaced about a surviving pride with the genetic marker, I used my hunting operation as cover to track and protect them." "Which is why you claim to have shot Simba when you hadn't," Catherine concluded, joining their conversation. "You were protecting him from other hunters." A heavy silence fell as Marcus absorbed these revelations. His entire understanding of his past had been upended. Yet strangely, he felt no anger toward Eleanor or Reynolds, only a profound sense that invisible threads had been drawing him toward this moment his entire life. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he finally asked Eleanor. "All these years working together?" Eleanor's composure finally cracked. "Cowardice," she admitted, tears flowing freely now. "After James died, I contacted your aunt in Montana. She decided, and I agreed, that the truth was too traumatic for an 8-year-old boy. The plan was to tell you when you were older, but—" She shook her head regretfully. "The right moment never seemed to come. Then you appeared in my department as a graduate student, brilliant and passionate, just like your father, and I couldn't bear to reopen those wounds. Or face your own guilt, Reynolds added, not unkindly. Eleanor nodded, accepting the assessment. Yes, I've carried that guilt for 35 years. If I had agreed with James immediately, if we had intervened sooner, he might still be alive, Marcus finished. I'm so sorry, Marcus, Eleanor whispered. I've wanted to tell you 1,000 times. Every time you'd approach a wild lion with that same fearless intuition James had, I'd see him in you, and the words would stick in my throat. The weight of 3 decades of secrecy hung in the air between them. Marcus struggled to reconcile his memories with this new reality, to process the depth of Eleanor's guilt and the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them full circle to this moment. Before he could respond, William's urgent voice called from the perimeter. Movement in the grass, southwest approach. The security team immediately went on alert, weapons raised toward the indicated direction. The lions sensed the tension. Simba moved closer to Savannah and the cubs, while the white lion, Ghost, turned to face the potential threat. Thermal imaging shows 2 figures approaching on foot, reported the security team leader. Human signatures. Marcus forced himself to his feet despite the pain in his side. Hold your fire, he ordered. Wait for visual confirmation. Tense seconds passed as everyone strained to see into the darkness beyond their lighted perimeter. Then, emerging from the tall grass like apparitions, 2 figures appeared. An elderly Maasai man supported by a younger woman, both in traditional dress. William lowered his rifle immediately. It's Olonana, he said with evident relief. Elder from the nearest village, and his granddaughter, Naserian. The security team relaxed their posture but maintained vigilance as William went forward to greet the newcomers. The old man spoke rapidly in Ma, the Maasai language, gesturing toward the lions with obvious agitation. What's he saying? Marcus asked as William returned with the visitors. Something's happened at their village, William translated. He says the spirits sent him to warn us. The old man's gaze fixed on the white lion, and he gasped, speaking more urgently. He says Ghost is not just any lion, William continued translating. According to their oral history, the white lions appear only in times of great transition, death giving way to new life, old orders falling to make way for new beginnings. Olonana turned to Eleanor now, speaking directly to her despite the language barrier. His weathered hand reached out to touch her arm with surprising gentleness. He says he remembers you, William translated, his expression showing surprise. From the time of great sorrow, when the lion man was lost. Eleanor paled visibly. The Maasai who helped search for James, she whispered. He was just a young warrior then. Olonana continued speaking, his voice gaining urgency. The granddaughter, Naserian, looked increasingly distressed as she listened. There's been an attack at their village, William translated grimly. Men came looking for lions, threatened the elders for information. When no one cooperated, they burned one of the cattle enclosures as warning. Olonana believes they're heading this way. Zhao's backup team, Reynolds concluded. Kalu was just the first wave. The news shattered their momentary reprieve. Whatever personal revelations and reconciliations might have been possible would have to wait. They were still in danger, and now an innocent village had been drawn into the conflict. Dr. Cohn approached from where she'd been monitoring Savannah. The lioness needs at least 24 hours before she can be moved safely, she reported. Any significant stress or exertion could reopen her wounds and trigger hemorrhaging. Marcus weighed their limited options. The helicopter that had brought Catherine's security team had departed to refuel and would not return until morning. Reynolds' men were maintaining a perimeter to the north, but they were outnumbered if Zhao had indeed sent additional forces. How far is your village? Marcus asked Olonana through William. 4 kilometers west, William translated the elder's response. But he says we cannot go there. The strangers may return. Catherine stepped forward. My security team can escort the village elders to safety. The Foundation has protocols for protecting indigenous communities affected by conservation conflicts. But Olanana shook his head firmly, speaking with conviction. He says he didn't come for evacuation, William translated. He came to help us protect the white lion and the new cubs. He says it's a sacred duty of his people. The old man's courage was humbling. Despite the danger to himself and his community, he had traveled in darkness to warn them and offer assistance, honoring an ancient covenant between his people and the lions that shared their land. As they debated their next steps, a low, mournful sound drew everyone's attention. The white lion, Ghost, had moved to stand before Olanana and was making a soft, chuffing noise unlike typical lion vocalizations. The old Maasai showed no fear, meeting the great cat's gaze with calm reverence. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Cohn whispered. "This level of interaction between wild lions and humans defies everything we know about predator behavior." For Marcus, watching the white lion communicate with Olanana felt like glimpsing his father's unfinished work, the deeper connection between humans and lions that James Johnson had theorized decades ago. Their contemplation was interrupted by the sharp crack of gunfire in the distance, a single shot followed by several more in rapid succession. "Reynolds' men engaging hostiles," the security team leader assessed, already organizing his personnel for defense. "Sounds like they're coming from the northeast." The situation had deteriorated from quiet revelation to imminent danger in moments. Marcus looked from Savannah and her vulnerable cubs to Eleanor, the mentor who had hidden his past but also shaped his future, to the white lion that somehow connected them all across time and tragedy. In that moment of crisis, a sudden searing pain shot through Marcus's side, causing him to double over. The medic rushed to his aid, quickly discovering that the exertion had torn his stitches, reopening the knife wound. "He's bleeding internally," the medic announced, his voice tight with concern. "He needs proper medical attention, now." Eleanor knelt beside Marcus, her face ashen. "Not again," she whispered. "I can't lose you too, not like this, not like James." As Marcus fought to remain conscious, the tragic parallel was lost on no one. Another Johnson, bleeding on African soil while protecting the same extraordinary lions that had claimed his father's life 35 years before. The gunfire grew closer. Savannah struggled to her feet despite her weakness, standing protectively over her cubs. Simba and Ghost positioned themselves between the humans and the approaching threat, as if understanding exactly what was happening. "Get him to the vehicle," Eleanor ordered, her scientific detachment giving way to raw emotion. "Catherine, call your helicopter back. Emergency evacuation." "There's no time," the medic replied grimly. "The bleeding is too severe. We need to operate here." As darkness closed in on Marcus's vision, he reached out to grasp Eleanor's hand. "Tell me one thing," he whispered through the pain. "Was he my biological father?" "James Johnson?" Eleanor's eyes widened in surprise at the unexpected question. "Yes," she answered, tears flowing freely now. "James was your father. But how did you—" "The way you've looked at me all these years," Marcus managed weakly, "like you were seeing a ghost." Before Eleanor could respond, Marcus lost consciousness, his hand going limp in hers. The last thing he heard was her desperate voice calling his name, eerily echoing across 35 years of hidden truths and unfinished legacies. The tragedy that had begun at Lake Natron seemed poised to repeat itself in perfect, cruel symmetry, A Johnson life once again hanging in the balance while extraordinary lions faced extinction, and those who loved them faced impossible choices between science and compassion, between natural order and human intervention. Consciousness returned to Marcus in fragments. Hushed voices, the antiseptic smell of a medical facility, the rhythmic beeping of monitoring equipment. He struggled to open his eyes, fighting against the heavy sedation. When he finally succeeded, harsh fluorescent light assaulted his vision, causing him to blink rapidly. "He's awake," came a familiar voice. Catherine's. "Dr. Evans, he's awake." A figure in medical scrubs appeared above him, shining a pen light into his eyes. "Dr. Johnson, can you hear me? If you understand, squeeze my hand." Marcus managed a weak squeeze, his throat too dry to speak. A straw touched his lips, and he sipped gratefully. "Where am I?" he finally croaked. "Nairobi Hospital," Catherine answered, coming into view. Dark circles underlined her eyes, but her smile was genuine. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." 3 days? Marcus tried to sit up, but was immediately halted by searing pain in his side. "Easy," cautioned Dr. Evans. "You had significant internal bleeding. The surgery was complicated. Memories flooded back. The confrontation with Kalu, Eleanor's revelation about his father, the approaching gunfire, and then nothing. Savannah," he managed. "The cubs. What happened?" Catherine's smile widened. "They're safe. All 3 survived." Relief washed over him, but questions remained. "Eleanor? William? What about the attack?" "William's fine," Catherine assured him. "He's back at the research station coordinating with authorities." Her expression grew more somber. "Eleanor, she's here in Nairobi too. She's been waiting for you to wake up." Something in her tone triggered alarm. "Is she hurt?" "Not physically, no." Catherine exchanged glances with the doctor. "I should let her explain. She's been by your side almost constantly. Just stepped out for coffee." Dr. Evans checked Marcus's vitals once more. "Short visits only," he instructed Catherine. "He needs rest." As the doctor left, Catherine moved closer to Marcus's bedside. "There's something you should know before Eleanor returns," she said quietly. "The night you were injured, William saved your life." "William?" Marcus was confused. "How?" "He's a universal blood donor. Type O negative. When you were bleeding out and we couldn't evacuate you, he volunteered for a direct transfusion." Catherine's eyes shone with emotion. "The medic said it was the only thing that kept you alive until help arrived." Marcus absorbed this information with growing wonder. William Thompson, the former poacher-turned-guide, had literally given his blood to save him. "And Reynolds?" he asked. Catherine's expression clouded. "His men held off the second wave of poachers long enough for the helicopter to return. He was injured in the process, but he'll recover." Before Marcus could inquire further, the door opened and Eleanor Blackwell entered. The past 3 days had aged her visibly, her face drawn, shoulders hunched with exhaustion. When she saw Marcus awake, she froze, coffee cup trembling in her hand. "I'll give you 2 some privacy," Catherine said tactfully, squeezing Marcus's hand before departing. Eleanor approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid Marcus might send her away. "They said you were improving, but I needed to see for myself," she said, setting down her coffee with unsteady hands. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been gutted," Marcus replied honestly. "But alive. Catherine says everyone else is safe too." Eleanor nodded, taking the chair beside his bed. "The lions have been relocated to a secure facility within the national park. Savannah has recovered remarkably well. Both cubs are thriving. And Ghost, the white lion?" A small smile touched Eleanor's lips. "He followed them. The Wildlife Authority wanted to tranquilize and relocate him separately, but I convinced them to observe instead. He's established himself as a protector, not a traditional pride male, but something different. Like my father theorized, Marcus noted. The mention of his father created a palpable tension between them. Eleanor's gaze dropped to her hands. "Marcus, there's so much I need to tell you," she began. "So much I should have told you years ago." "You said James Johnson was my biological father," Marcus prompted. "What did you mean?" Eleanor took a deep breath, visibly gathering her courage. "Your father, James, and I were more than research partners. We fell in love during our second year in Tanzania." Her voice softened with the memory. "It was complicated. He was married to your mother in Montana, and I was dedicated to my career above all else." "You had an affair," Marcus stated, neither judging nor accusatory, simply seeking clarity. "We did," Eleanor confirmed. When he returned to Montana for his annual visit home, he planned to ask for a divorce, to tell Sarah about us. Her expression crumpled slightly. But when he arrived, he discovered she was pregnant with their second child. "You were 8, and she was expecting a daughter." Marcus struggled to align this new information with his childhood memories. He chose to stay with her. Eleanor nodded. "As he should have. We agreed to end our relationship, to continue as professional colleagues only, and we did, for nearly a year." She paused, the next part clearly difficult. "Until I discovered I was pregnant." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Marcus stared at Eleanor, unable to fully process what she was telling him. "You were pregnant with my father's child?" "Yes." Eleanor's eyes held his, unwavering despite her obvious emotional distress. "I was nearly 5 months along when the incident at Lake Natron occurred." Marcus's mind raced, calculating timelines. "What happened to the baby?" Eleanor's composure finally broke. Tears spilled down her weathered cheeks as decades of carefully guarded grief surfaced. "After James disappeared, I was distraught, traumatized. The search, the stress. I went into premature labor." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My son, our son, was born too early. The nearest medical facility was hours away." "He didn't survive," Marcus concluded gently. "He did." Eleanor's response was barely audible. Against all odds, against medical probability, William helped deliver him, kept him alive during the journey to Arusha Hospital. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a worn photograph, passing it to Marcus with trembling fingers. The faded image showed a much younger Eleanor holding a tiny infant, standing beside a hospital incubator. Marcus studied it, a strange sensation building in his chest. "I named him Marcus," Eleanor continued, "after my grandfather." The room seemed to tilt around him as the implication became clear. "Eleanor," he said carefully, "are you saying—" "You're not James and Sarah's son," she confirmed, tears flowing freely now. "You're James and mine." The revelation was so enormous, so reality-altering, that Marcus could only stare at her in stunned silence. "When James disappeared, when I nearly lost the baby, I was alone in a foreign country with no legal standing," Eleanor continued, the words tumbling out as if a dam had broken. "Your aunt, James's sister Mary, came to Tanzania to collect his effects. When she saw the baby, saw you, she—" Eleanor's voice caught. "She offered to take you home to Montana to raise you with your father's name, his history." "She knew?" Marcus whispered. "She was the only one who did," Eleanor confirmed. "Sarah had lost her baby in childbirth just a month before. Mary thought it would help her heal, to have you to raise. And I was in no condition to care for an infant. My career, my visa situation, my emotional state, So you gave me away, Marcus stated, trying to keep the accusation from his voice but not entirely succeeding. Eleanor flinched as if struck. I made an impossible choice. I thought you would have a better life in America, with family, with stability. Her aged hands clutched at each other. Mary promised to tell you the truth when you were older, but then she died when you were 12 and I lost track of you. Until I showed up in your department as a graduate student, Marcus finished, pieces of his life rearranging themselves into a new pattern. Was that coincidence? Entirely, Eleanor assured him. When I saw your application, your name, I thought it must be fate. But I was a coward. I should have told you then. Marcus closed his eyes, overwhelmed. His entire identity, his understanding of his past, all of it built on carefully constructed falsehoods. Yet strangely, he felt no anger toward the woman beside him, only a profound sense of connection. William knows, he said suddenly, understanding dawning. That's why he gave me his blood without hesitation. Eleanor nodded. He's known since the beginning. He helped deliver you, helped arrange your transport to America. He's been watching over you all these years, in his own way. And Reynolds? Suspected, but wasn't certain until he saw us together at Savannah's birth. Eleanor wiped her tears with a tissue. Your hands move exactly like James's when you work, and you have his intuitive connection with the lions. Science can't explain it, but it's there. Marcus reopened his eyes, studying the woman who had been his mentor for 15 years and his mother for nearly 40, without his knowledge. In her weathered face, he could see traces of his own features, particularly around the eyes. The white lion, he said suddenly. Ghost. You said you raised him after Lake Natron, gave him my father's field cord. I did. Is it possible? Marcus hesitated, the question sounding absurd even to himself. Could he have somehow recognized me? Sensed a connection to James? Eleanor considered this seriously. Conventional science would say no, but your father believed these lions possessed cognitive abilities far beyond our understanding. She smiled faintly. If anyone would appreciate the possibility, it would be James. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened again and an unexpected figure entered. Victor Reynolds, moving slowly with the aid of a cane, his right leg heavily bandaged. Sorry to interrupt, Reynolds said, noting the tears and tense atmosphere. I can come back. No, Eleanor said firmly. Stay, Victor. No more secrets. Reynolds approached cautiously, his usually commanding presence diminished by injury, but his eyes sharp as ever. I see you've finally told him. Yes, Eleanor confirmed. Reynolds turned to Marcus. For what it's worth, I've been encouraging her to tell you the truth for decades. You knew from the beginning? Marcus asked. I suspected, Reynolds corrected. Eleanor never confirmed it, but the timing was obvious to anyone paying attention. He lowered himself carefully into a chair, wincing slightly. When I saw you working with Savannah, I was certain. You have your father's hands, his way with animals. Marcus studied this man who had been painted as a villain in conservation circles, the notorious trophy hunter who had allegedly decimated lion populations across Africa. Yet here he was, injured while protecting the very species he supposedly hunted. Catherine told me you were hurt defending the lions, Marcus acknowledged. Thank you. Reynolds dismissed the gratitude with a wave. Long overdue atonement. I've spent 35 years trying to undo my part in what happened at Lake Natron. By becoming a trophy hunter? Marcus questioned skeptically. By infiltrating the very networks that threatened these lions, Reynolds corrected. When research funding dried up, when the scientific community rejected James's theories, I took a different approach. I built relationships with the wealthy, the powerful, people who viewed wildlife as commodities. From there, I could monitor threats, redirect hunts away from significant prides, particularly those carrying the golden mane gene. Eleanor nodded in confirmation. Victor's information has saved dozens of lions over the years. His methods were unorthodox, but effective. While you worked within the system, I worked outside it, Reynolds explained. Different approaches, same goal, preserving James's legacy. Marcus absorbed this information, his perspective on Reynolds shifting dramatically. And Catherine, how does she fit into all this? My daughter became my conscience, Reynolds admitted. When she learned what I was doing, she established her foundation as a legitimate counterweight, funding research I couldn't support openly without blowing my cover. The elaborate, decades-long dance these people had performed around each other and around him was almost too much to comprehend. His entire professional life had been shaped by their hidden agendas and old guilt. So what happens now? Marcus asked finally. With Savannah and the cubs? With Ghost? That depends partly on you, Eleanor replied. Catherine's foundation has funded a new research initiative dedicated to proving your father's theories about advanced cognition in genetically distinct lion populations. They're offering you the directorship, Reynolds added. Your work with Savannah has already generated unprecedented data on human-lion interaction. With proper documentation and peer review, it could revolutionize conservation approaches. The opportunity was extraordinary, a chance to complete the work his father had started to vindicate theories that had been dismissed decades ago. Yet Marcus hesitated, the weight of newly discovered truths still settling around him. And what about us? He asked Eleanor directly. Where do we go from here? Eleanor's expression reflected the uncertainty he felt. That's entirely up to you, Marcus. I've kept the truth from you for too long to expect forgiveness or understanding. All I can offer is the truth, finally, and my support for whatever you decide. As Marcus contemplated this complex offering, his medical monitors began beeping more rapidly. Dr. Evans returned promptly, frowning at the gathered visitors. This is too much stimulation, he declared firmly. You all need to leave and let my patient rest. Eleanor rose immediately, respecting the medical directive. We'll continue this conversation when you're stronger, she promised Marcus. There's no rush now. After 35 years, we have time. As she and Reynolds prepared to depart, Marcus called out, "Wait!" When they turned back, he fixed his gaze on Eleanor. There's something I need to know. The night I was injured when I was bleeding out, William said you tried to give me your blood first, but couldn't. Eleanor nodded, understanding his question. Type A negative, not compatible with your O negative. But if you're my biological mother, Reynolds answered for her. James was O negative. You inherited his blood type, not Eleanor's, which is how we knew William could save you, Eleanor added softly. He shares your father's blood type. The scientific confirmation of his paternity, something as simple and irrefutable as blood type, provided strange comfort amid the swirling uncertainties. Whatever else might be questionable in this tangled history, his connection to James Johnson was real, verified in the most basic biological terms. As exhaustion overtook him, Marcus had one final question. The lion cubs, what are their names? A smile touched Eleanor's tired face. The female is Najuma, born during difficult times. The male, she hesitated, emotion threatening to overwhelm her again. The male is James. With that revelation lingering in the air, they departed, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the beeping monitors. Outside his window, the Nairobi skyline glittered in the gathering dusk, a world away from the Serengeti plains where extraordinary lions defied scientific understanding and where the truth of his origin had finally emerged after 35 years of silence. As sleep claimed him, Marcus's last thoughts were not of betrayal or loss, but of connection. To the father he'd never truly known, to the mother he'd known without recognizing, and to the remarkable lions that had somehow brought everything full circle. In that moment between consciousness and dreams, he could almost feel the presence of James Johnson, not as a ghost from the past, but as a legacy continuing into the future. 1 year later, Marcus stood on the observation platform overlooking the specialized enclosure that had become known throughout the conservation world as the Johnson Pride Sanctuary. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the carefully designed habitat, a 500-acre protected area within Serengeti National Park, funded by Catherine's Foundation and supported by the Tanzanian government. Below, Savannah lounged in dappled shade, her coat gleaming with health as she watched her cubs, now robust yearlings, playfully stalk a butterfly. The female, Najuma, displayed her mother's patience and calculating intelligence, while young James embodied the boundless energy and curiosity that researchers had come to associate with the Golden Mane genetic line. "They're thriving," observed Eleanor, joining Marcus at the railing. At 79, she moved more slowly these days, but her mind remained sharp, her passion for the work undiminished. James would have been so proud to see this. Marcus nodded, still adjusting to the easy way Eleanor now referenced his father, their shared connection no longer a carefully guarded secret. The past year had brought many such adjustments, a gradual recalibration of his understanding of family, legacy, and truth. "The latest cognition tests confirm it," he replied, referencing the groundbreaking research they'd been conducting. "This pride demonstrates problem-solving abilities 3 times more advanced than standard lion populations. Dad was right all along." The word "dad" no longer felt strange on his tongue when speaking of James Johnson. If anything, learning the truth had strengthened Marcus's connection to the father he'd barely known, transforming a vague childhood memory into a tangible legacy he now continued. "Look," Eleanor said softly, pointing to the northern edge of the enclosure where a distinctive white form had appeared. "Ghost is back." The white lion emerged fully from the tall grass, magnificent and otherworldly in the golden afternoon light. Though not confined to the sanctuary, Ghost had established a pattern of regular visits, particularly during the research team's observation hours. His behavior defied conventional understanding of lion sociology, a mature male who neither challenged Simba for dominance nor attempted to harm the cubs, but instead served as a sentinel, an additional protector. "3rd visit this week," Marcus noted, jotting an observation in his field journal. "Always at the same time. He's tracking our schedule." "The critics still call it anthropomorphism," Eleanor said with a hint of defiance. "But the data speaks for itself." The data indeed told a remarkable story. Over the past year, their research team had documented unprecedented cognitive abilities in the Johnson Pride lions, from complex problem-solving to apparent recognition of individual humans to sophisticated communication patterns among Pride members. The initial peer-reviewed papers had generated both excitement and controversy in the scientific community, but the evidence was becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. "Dr. Johnson?" A young researcher approached, tablet in hand. "The new thermal imaging system is online. We're getting excellent readings of Ghost's movements, even when he's in the tall grass." "Thank you, Amina," Marcus acknowledged. "Let's schedule a full review of the data tomorrow morning." As the researcher departed, Eleanor smiled. "You've built an impressive team." "We've built it," Marcus corrected. The collaborative "we" came naturally now, the past year having transformed their formerly hierarchical mentor-student relationship into a genuine partnership based on shared goals and, gradually, shared understanding of their complex personal history. Movement at the sanctuary entrance caught their attention. William Thompson was leading a small group of visitors, including Victor Reynolds, leaning slightly on a carved wooden cane, and Catherine Miller, whose foundation's continued support had made their work possible. "Right on schedule," Eleanor observed. "Victor's punctuality is his one redeeming quality." Marcus smiled at the familiar jab. The relationship between Eleanor and Victor remained complicated, decades of history, both professional and personal, creating a dynamic that alternated between grudging respect and sharp disagreement. Yet they had found common ground in their shared commitment to continuing James Johnson's work. As the visitors approached the observation platform, Marcus noted the additional member of their party, a distinguished-looking Maasai elder. "Olonana," he greeted the old man warmly. "I didn't know you were visiting today." William translated as Olonana responded in Ma, gesturing toward the sanctuary below. "He says the Council of Elders has reached a decision about your proposal," William explained. "They've agreed to share their oral histories about the white lions and the golden mane pride. Their knowledge goes back many generations." This was significant news. The local Maasai communities had been cautiously supportive of the sanctuary, but protective of their traditional knowledge about the lions. Their willingness to share centuries of observations would add a valuable dimension to the research. "That's wonderful," Marcus responded, genuinely moved by the gesture of trust. "Please tell him we're honored." As William translated, Catherine joined them at the railing. "The documentary is gaining traction," she reported. "Over 20 million views online, and National Geographic is interested in producing an expanded version." The documentary, The Johnson Pride Rewriting Lion Behavior, had been Catherine's project, combining dramatic footage from Savannah's birth with a year of subsequent research. Its viral success had brought public attention to their work and, importantly, to the plight of lions across Africa. "Any word from the Conservation Council?" Eleanor inquired. Catherine nodded. "They're voting next month on the expanded protection zones. With the public support we've generated and the new research data, I'm optimistic." Victor Reynolds approached more slowly, his limp more pronounced today. The injuries he'd sustained protecting the lions had never fully healed, a fact he bore with stoic dignity. "Ghost is back," he observed, nodding toward the white lion. "Still wearing James's cord after all these years?" 36 years, Eleanor specified softly. Victor acknowledged this with a respectful nod. The shared history between them, once a source of bitterness, had evolved into something approaching mutual respect, if not quite friendship. "The Chinese trafficking network has been dismantled," Victor reported, shifting to business. "Zhao is facing charges in 3 countries. My contacts confirm the demand for golden mane specimens has dropped significantly since the documentary exposed the trade." This was another victory, albeit a quieter one. Victor's connections in the trophy hunting world had proven invaluable in tracking and ultimately helping to dismantle the wildlife trafficking operation that had threatened Savannah and her cubs. As the group observed the lions below, William stepped forward with his weathered field binoculars. "Movement at the south perimeter," he announced. "Simba's returning from patrol." Sure enough, the magnificent male lion with the distinctive golden mane appeared at the edge of the habitat. He moved with purpose, greeting Savannah with a gentle headbutt before acknowledging his growing cubs. Most remarkably, he exchanged what appeared to be a respectful glance with Ghost, a behavior that defied conventional understanding of male-lion interactions. "Still documenting every interaction?" Victor asked. Marcus nodded. "Every minute, from multiple angles. We're building the most comprehensive study of lion behavior ever assembled." "James would have loved this," Eleanor said softly, a familiar refrain that had become something of a touchstone for their work. As if in response to the mention of his namesake, the male cub, young James, suddenly looked up toward the observation platform. His amber eyes seemed to fix directly on the gathered humans with an intelligence that sent a shiver of recognition through Marcus. He knows we're talking about him, Catherine observed with a hint of wonder. Anthropomorphism, Victor cautioned automatically, though his tone lacked conviction. Perhaps, Marcus conceded. Or perhaps we're finally acknowledging what these animals have always been capable of understanding. The discussion might have continued, but it was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Cohn, the veterinarian who had helped save Savannah during her difficult birth, and now served as the sanctuary's chief medical officer. "Dr. Johnson," she greeted Marcus, "the DNA sequencing results have arrived from the laboratory in Nairobi." She handed him a sealed envelope, the culmination of months of careful genetic analysis comparing samples from Ghost, Simba, Savannah, and the cubs with preserved specimens from the original Natron Pride 36 years earlier. "Would you like to open it privately?" Dr. Cohn offered. Marcus glanced at Eleanor, whose expression reflected the same anticipation he felt. "No," he decided. "Everyone here has contributed to this research. We should review the results together." With careful fingers, he broke the seal and unfolded the laboratory report. The group gathered closer as he scanned the technical document, looking for the key findings among the scientific terminology. "It's confirmed," he announced, his voice thick with emotion. "Ghost is genetically linked to the Natron Pride male that Eleanor raised after Lake Natron. The mitochondrial DNA shows direct maternal lineage." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. "After all these years—" "There's more," Marcus continued, reading further. "The cubs show a genetic marker previously undocumented in lion populations, a specific sequence associated with advanced neural development. The lab is calling it the Johnson marker in their preliminary findings. The implications were enormous. Scientific validation of James Johnson's theories about these unique lions, and concrete evidence linking the current Pride to the one he had studied and ultimately died protecting nearly 4 decades earlier. So, Ghost is actually the descendant of the cub you saved at Lake Natron," Catherine clarified, understanding the significance. "The genetic line never died out." "Against all odds," Eleanor whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "James didn't die in vain." The emotional weight of the moment affected everyone differently. Eleanor wiping away tears, Victor staring thoughtfully at the lions below, William nodding as if a long-held belief had been confirmed, Catherine already calculating how to leverage this discovery for conservation efforts. For Marcus, the confirmation brought a sense of completion, a circle closing across time and tragedy. His father's work, his mother's perseverance, and his own journey had converged in this moment of validation. Olanana spoke again, gesturing emphatically toward the white lion. William translated. "He says his people have always known. The white lions carry the spirits of great protectors. They appear when they are needed most." Science and tradition, so often positioned as opponents, seemed to complement each other in this extraordinary case. The genetic evidence supported what the Maasai had maintained through generations of oral history. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sanctuary in warm golden light, the group fell into contemplative silence. Below, the lion family, Savannah, Simba, Najuma, and young James, rested together in easy companionship, while Ghost maintained his vigilant watch from a respectful distance. "What happens next?" Catherine finally asked, ever focused on forward momentum. Marcus considered the question, looking from the lions to the people gathered around him, each representing a different aspect of the journey that had brought them to this point. "We continue," he said simply. "We document, we protect, we learn. We expand the sanctuary model to other populations if we find similar genetic markers. Most importantly, we share what we've learned, not just with the scientific community, but with the world." Eleanor nodded in agreement. "James always said that understanding leads to compassion, and compassion leads to conservation. People protect what they connect with." As if understanding their discussion, Ghost moved closer to the observation platform, his pale coat luminous in the fading light. He stopped directly below them, raised his magnificent head, and met Marcus's gaze with an intensity that transcended species. "I still think he recognizes something in you," Eleanor said softly. Something of James. For once, no one, not even Victor, dismissed the possibility as mere sentiment. They had all witnessed too many inexplicable behaviors from these lions to discount any theory outright. As darkness began to fall over the Serengeti, the group prepared to depart for the research station. Marcus lingered a moment longer, watching as Ghost returned to his self-appointed post near Savannah and the cubs. Around the white lion's neck, barely visible in the gathering dusk, James Johnson's weathered field cord remained, a tangible link between past and present, between human and lion, between father and son. In that moment, Marcus felt a profound connection not just to his newly discovered biological parents, but to something larger, a legacy of understanding and protection that stretched across generations of both species. "Ready to go?" Eleanor asked gently, touching his arm. Marcus nodded, closing his field journal. "Yes," he replied. "I'm ready." As they walked together toward the waiting vehicles, Marcus glanced back one final time. In the last light of day, the lions of the Johnson Pride, extraordinary in their intelligence, remarkable in their behavior, represented not just a scientific breakthrough or a conservation success, but a promise fulfilled across decades of separation and silence. The truth had finally emerged, like Ghost himself, from the shadows of the past. And in that truth, Marcus had found not just his origins, but his purpose, continuing a legacy that connected human compassion with animal intelligence in ways science was only beginning to understand. For those of us in our golden years, Marcus and Eleanor's story reminds us it's never too late for truth and reconciliation. After 35 years of silence, Eleanor finally revealed her secret to the son she gave up, proving that family bonds transcend time and distance. Like the majestic lions of the Serengeti, we too can demonstrate remarkable resilience in the face of life's challenges. Think about your own journey, the roads not taken, the words left unspoken, the relationships that shaped you. Perhaps there's someone in your life waiting for that phone call, that letter, that moment of connection that could heal decades-old wounds. The Johnson Pride teaches us that protection of what we love requires courage, whether it's endangered wildlife or precious family ties. As Eleanor discovered at 79, happiness often arrives when we finally surrender our carefully guarded secrets and embrace vulnerability. What family truth have you been hesitant to share that might bring healing if spoken, or what broken relationship in your life deserves one more chance at reconciliation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to take that first step toward healing.